and I could hear this noise. And the noise was the beads on my dress. And we were live on television. There was no way that it was going to get past a certain part of my underwear. Get your hand off my thigh or whatever it was. And his hand was encroaching. I really didn't know what to do. Well, he assaulted me live on television. But the most extraordinary part of this story, which I have not mentioned since to anyone, it's the first time I've ever said this.
Welcome to a very special episode of the Daily Expresso. I'm JJ Anisiobi, and today I'm kind of living one of my ambitions out in real time. Sat opposite me is my good friend, the legendary broadcaster, Vanessa Feltz. Vanessa, you are funny, you're candid, you're honest, sometimes you're emotional, you're very smart, and you've been a columnist for the Daily Express for 25 years.
I know, it's my quarter century. Think of all the opinions I've had during that time, all the views I have trenchantly expressed at the Express. I've been most expressive. I hope I'm the Express's most expressive columnist of all time. I'm hoping so.
I think you are, and I think you're definitely our longest serving.
25 years, a heck of a long time, isn't it?
When you started, did you imagine you'd still be here in 25 years' time?
Certainly not. No, I did not. I wouldn't have dreamed it could have lasted this long. I mean, I had been a newspaper columnist before.
Yeah.
I mean, I was a newspaper columnist.
Yeah.
And I was poached by the then proprietor, Richard Desmond, from the Mirror.
Uh-huh.
And at the time, there was no allegiance or business connection between the Mirror and the Express. So that was quite a controversial appointment. Mm-hmm. And I was wooed and beguiled by his charm and his checkbook at the time. But what he hadn't realised was that I was just about to go into the very first ever Celebrity Big Brother.
Wow.
So he poached me in sort of January 2001. March 2001, I marched into the Big Brother house, the very first time any celebs ever had. It was me and Anthea Turner, you'll remember, Chris Eubank, Jack Dee, Keith Duffy from Boyzone, and Claire Sweeney, who'd been on Brookside. Yeah. And what nobody knew then was what a phenomenon reality TV was going to turn out to be. Because we all think that the conversation about, there's so much reality TV, there's too much reality TV, there are too many celebrities on TV, we think that's been going on forever, but it hasn't. It started in March 2001, really, because we were the first ever celebrities to do a show like that. And when we went in as innocent flowers, and we came out as bruised and battered casualties, especially me, because I'd been the one writing on the table,
I remember
sobbing, weeping, wearing a leopard skin dressing gown and sunglasses inside. I was that person. And to Richard Desmond, the proprietor then of the Express's absolute delight, inside the Big Brother house, part of my contract was I had to be allowed to write my column for the Express.
Wow.
And so when I went in, nobody knew how many people would or would not be watching this show, as it was the very first of its ilk. It could have been no one. It could have been the ratings were rubbish. It turned out that something between 15 and 20 million people watched that show, the very first Celebrity Big Brother.
Crikey.
And the bit where I was writing my column for the Express was like, of course, an advertisement-free commercial for the Express newspaper. So it was absolutely amazing. They made me write it on an ancient and decrepit manual typewriter, sitting in the room with all the other housemates. I had to churn out this column, and I wrote about what was going on inside the Big Brother house, obviously, because that's where I was.
Yeah.
And so it was a unique insight into what was happening inside. Uh-huh. And that was what he sort of got for his intrepid nature of having wooed me in the first place. So it was quite a spectacular kind of debut, really.
Oh, superb.
Yeah.
Has your column changed tone over the years? You're very forthright. You don't hold back. Especially off camera, you will say exactly what you think. So has your column changed? Have you simmered?
You kindly showed me my first ever column. Mm-hmm. What was interesting to me was that very day I'd written my current column, and it was all about, a part of it was about Peter Mandelson, Lord Mandelson, and what had happened to him in Hollywood, in America, and the whole Jeffrey Epstein connection, everything like that. And when I started, my very first column had something to do with how deeply unpopular he was in Northern Ireland, and so it was interesting. I was still writing about Lord Mandelson a quarter of a century later, still not nice. When I read the first column I'd ever written, I thought maybe I'd mellowed a little over the years. Do you agree?
I think you have. I think, you were a mother already when you first wrote the column.
I was already a mother, yeah.
But I think you have matured and simmered a little bit. A little.
Simmered down.
Simmered down, yeah.
Yes.
Simmered down a little bit.
Simmered down a little bit. Maybe I didn't really realise. I better get my edge back somehow. I better not let myself do that, had I?
Do you think columnists are allowed to say exactly what they want? Of course, there's always going to be an editor who's going to go through and say, or maybe not. But generally speaking, do you think in today, if you've got some power behind you, you think you could just write whatever you wanted and let it go?
I think it's a question of why you want to write it. What are you trying to do? I think some columnists are deliberately malicious and unpleasant, and they have a kind of malevolent view of the world, and particularly malevolent view of other people. And I'm thinking of one particular columnist. I don't know whether you know. I can imagine who I'm thinking of. Almost every single word they write is something nasty and targeted at a particular individual. And then you might ask yourself, why have you written that? Why do you want to be quite so objectionable, quite so, unpleasant? Do you just want to write a column that is full of unpleasant observations about people you don't know or even people you do know? Well, I don't want to do that. That's never been my ambition, to just write a whole load of nasty things about people for no reason, gratuitous nastiness. What's the point of that? I'm not trying to do that.
Yeah.
So could I say something really nasty if I felt like I suppose I could, but I don't want to. So there's that. Obviously, you're restricted by the law in a way that podcasts, of course, are not. On this podcast, I could probably say anything I like.
Yeah.
In a column, you can't. You've got the teams of lawyers checking that you haven't said anything that is outside the realms of the law. So that stops you. But you have to wonder about why you're doing it. What do you want to say? What is it that you want to communicate? Do you want to be someone who is constantly carping and criticising absolutely everybody, or do you want to be someone, which I hope I am, I think I am anyway, unless I'm completely deluded, with some kind of empathy, some kind of heart and soul? And maybe it's the case that as your own life pans out, you make mistakes. I certainly have. Mine are hugely well documented and all very much in the public arena. I've made all kinds of mistakes, bad choices, things I wish I hadn't done or said or whatever it is, and particularly romantic allegiances I wish I hadn't had. And I suppose that kind of makes you feel more forgiving of other people, much less likely to judge them and simply be harsh, much more likely to be understanding because you've walked in their shoes. And I think maybe that's why I might have mellowed a bit over 25 years. I think that's possibly the reason.
It's funny you say that about maybe you've mellowed out over the years. What I like about you is when we're out together, people... We can be sat in a restaurant. I think we went for Thanksgiving dinner a couple of years ago, and we're sat in the restaurant, and everyone's looking around and going, "Oh my God, there's Vanessa! Oh my God, there's Vanessa! Oh my God, there's Vanessa! Oh my God, there's Vanessa!" And everyone's almost there. In those situations, people are too scared to come up to you and say, "How can I get a picture?"
It's so funny. I don't think they are.
Oh, really?
I always think if I were Trevor McDonald, they'd say, "That's Trevor McDonald." But they wouldn't come up. But I think because it's me, they do come up. I think because they've often seen me on telly doing shows with members of the public, standing right close to them. So I think they always think they can come, squash me under their armpits, say that, "Hang on, that's my mother-in-law." Say, hang on, I'm just going to ring my mum. Say, "Hello, I'm Vanessa Feltz. How's your mum?" I always think people do come up. It's funny that you think that, because I don't think that.
Maybe I'm the
you
problem.
Must have been putting them off. I'm sure it was you. I think it was you, definitely. I blame you for that.
Before the fame,
Yeah.
What did young Vanessa Feltz think she'd end up doing?
Get married. That's all my parents wanted me to do.
The goal.
I read English literature at Cambridge. I was at Trinity College, Cambridge. So I was a bright and academic girl.
Yeah.
But the heat was on in the community I grew up in, which is, the Jewish community of Northwest London. The only real kind of pinnacle of attainment and achievement was finding yourself a husband. So I think my parents thought that Cambridge would make me more marriageable and more eligible, but didn't really care very much about what I did. And I went into journalism, but only because my father said if I couldn't make a living immediately, I'd have to do law, which I didn't want to do. And I got married, which is what I was kind of trained to do and bred to do, which seems ridiculous. That's why I always say it felt like I was growing up in Fiddler on the Roof.
Yeah.
But actually, I was born in 1962. I was growing up in the 70s and 80s.
Yeah.
I was an absolute anachronism, completely kind of outside my time. My contemporaries at university weren't thinking of getting married. I was already married by that. I engaged at 22, married at 23, first baby at 24.
Wow. That was sweet.
And my parents said, "What took you so long?
Oh my goodness.
Hurry up.
But you haven't raised your daughters the same way your parents raised you in that
Certainly
respect.
not, no. I certainly didn't want them to feel under pressure to get married in the way that I did. I thought it was absolutely ridiculous then and totally ridiculous now. Definitely not, no.
Your rise in television back in the day, to me, as a young viewer, it seemed very rapid. No, what was it a case of bang, that's it, now you're on TV? Or I'm presuming you worked your way up and suddenly you had a TV show?
Well, I graduated, I got married. I married a junior hospital doctor, so he didn't have any money and I didn't have any money, and the parents certainly didn't shell out any money. So I had to work. So I worked as a journalist in any way I could think of being a journalist. And very quickly, I got to be a columnist with a picture, your byline and your picture. That happened fast. That was fast. So I was writing columns about this, columns about that. And over the years, it took some years, I was then asked onto the radio to talk about a column I'd written.
Okay.
And on the radio, they asked me back and back and back. And I was one of those people who's better with a microphone than without.
Yeah.
Most people are not. Most people, give them a microphone, they dry up.
Yeah.
They get shy. They suddenly feel self-conscious. They suddenly get a frog in the throat. Anything they were thinking on the train on the way there, they've forgotten. They start sweating. They're not good.
Yeah.
You're good.
Thank you.
Well, you are. Some people are, and most people are not. So I was asked back and back and back to do the radio, which I loved. I didn't get paid. It was BBC Radio London's Jewish programme.
Okay.
I didn't get paid, but I just loved it.
Yeah.
What did my parents say? How does your husband feel about you doing that? Should you be doing? Who's looking after the children? I felt like saying, well, I just threw them in the garden and gave them a tin opener and a tin of baked beans. Of course, paid a babysitter to do it. So they said, you're paying a babysitter, well then, and you're not earning anything. It's costing you money to do it. Should you be doing it?
No.
But I loved it. I
Yeah.
loved it. I really enjoyed it. And I just thought, well, I'm actually a grown-up lady. I'm a married woman. I'm a mother of two. What does my husband think? Actually, I don't really mind what he thinks. And it was only up the road. It was only in Marylebone High. So I only lived in, Hampton Garden suburb. It was like a 15-minute drive in the car, for God's sake.
Yeah.
And I really enjoyed it. So I was doing that. And then I one day got this phone call on the house phone, no such thing as a mobile phone in those days. And the caller said something like, oh, beeping, beep, beeping hell, beep. I can't believe beep. I finally got you, Vanessa. And I said, well, who is this? And it was one of the bookers from This Morning with Richard and Judy, which in those days used to come from the Albert Dock in Liverpool.
Yes.
And I said, gosh, hello. And they said, we read all your columns in She magazine. I was a columnist at She magazine in those days. It was kind of, She magazine was for Cosmo Girl Grows Up.
Okay.
So Cosmo Girl by this time might have a child, different kind of, she was a grown-up lady. And they said, we've been trying to get hold of you and trying to get hold of you. We tried through the editor. The editor said you wouldn't do it unless we could put the words She magazine across the screen. Of course, the editor had not told me or asked me or informed me. I had no idea they were trying to get hold of me.
Sounds like our editor.
Yeah, exactly. Anyway, so I ended up on the TV.
Wow.
Doing Richard and Judy. Doing This Morning with Richard and Judy. So I was on the radio by default. I was on the telly by default. I did get paid for the telly, but not very much.
Yeah.
But boy, was it good fun.
Yeah.
It was such a good laugh. Can you imagine with Richard and Judy in those days?
Yeah.
And that's what happened. Then I got noticed by Anglia TV, who were looking for a British Oprah. And at that time, all the stations, because remember there were all the different stations,
Yeah.
Anglia and maybe Scottish TV and Welsh TV and Granada and on all of those, they were all looking, and Thames, all looking for a British Oprah. And Anglia chose me. And Anglia were very clever because they had an alliance with Multimedia, which was the American company that made Jerry Springer, but also Phil Donahue, Sally Jessy Raphael, and all of that.
Wowzers.
And so they went in with them, and we made 6 practice shows, which were just showed in the Anglia region. And then, like everybody else, we had to submit them or submit our application to be the British Oprah. And I was chosen, you see. So that's how it all happened. That was 1994.
God.
Yeah. And when it happened, it kind of happened so smoothly, I sort of assumed that's what happened to everyone. But it was absolutely, because I didn't know anything about
Yeah, of
it at all.
course.
But of course, it was incredibly unusual that should happen.
Yeah.
And so that's how I ended up with my own show on television.
Was there a moment when you realised, holy F, I'm famous?
Yes.
When was that?
Pretty much immediately.
Yeah.
And some people never get famous. They're on TV all their lives. I mean, there are various people on, for example, BBC consumer programs.
Yeah.
They're always there. They do an excellent job. Their job is to be on TV. But if you ask someone what's their name, do you know anything about them, how many children have they got, they would just say no.
Yeah.
But I don't know, there was something, I still don't really know why, I honestly don't, but there was something kind of noticeable or other about me, and I was pretty much famous immediately and a sort of tabloid creature straight away, which was a bit of a shock because I was just I was 34, I was married to a nice doctor,
Yeah.
I had 2 little girls. I didn't expect to be that person at all, but once you are, you can't unbe that person. You just are that been that person ever since.
Was the atmosphere in those days, was it pretty sexist, pretty misogynistic? Was it difficult for you, a young, pretty, blonde woman, to
Very nice of you to call me pretty. I mean, what they really called me was fat.
Even back in the day?
Oh,
back
yeah.
in the early days?
Yeah, the woman who ate her audience, breasts like World War One, barrage balloons, perfect face for radio, and much worse. But if you look at the sorts of things that men wrote about women in those days, if you look at, for example, the way poor Jade Goody was assassinated by adult, middle-class, wealthy men, and her life had been so horrifically traumatic. You know, she had cared for an addicted mother. She had really suffered as a child.
Yeah.
She came on Big Brother, and she was meant to be fair game. They called her the pig.
Yeah.
You know, the way that she was written about and talked about. I mean, I think she got the worst of it, but I think all women got an enormous avalanche of criticism and personal abuse, really.
Yeah.
And I was definitely one of them. And as I say, from my background, I hadn't expected anything like that. I thought people would say, well, she's a nice person. What an interesting lady she is. I didn't think they would start talking about my physical appearance and absolutely, harpooning me in that way.
Yeah.
So I think things have definitely changed, and I do think for the better. When people say, oh, it's all got so woke, well, yeah, it's less racist, less sexist, and even if it isn't, you have to at least pretend you're not. Whereas in those days, you didn't even have to pretend you weren't.
Yeah.
You know, it's a big difference.
Who would you say is the best person you've ever interviewed? And I'm going to ask you who the worst person is afterwards.
Oh God,
as well.
I hate things about favourites and worst things. That's really difficult. I mean, my worst I can do more easily. My worst, well, I've got three worst really.
Is Rolf Harris one of the
Rolf
worst?
Harris is one of them.
Why was he?
He's the worst. Well, he
Tell us.
assaulted me live on television. And I was, on Big Breakfast on the bed. I used to be on the Big Breakfast on the bed person, and he was my guest. And like everyone else, I loved him because everyone did. We'd all grown up with him. Rolf Harris is your guest today. Hooray! Timey Kangaroo Down Sport, brilliant. You know, Jake the Peg, marvelous. You know, couldn't love him more. And he, the Big Breakfast bed was a fake bed actually, because it had to be hollow in case we had the Muppets on or Zig and Zag, so it was kind of a pretend bed. It was small. And in a tiny little room, because lockkeepers' cottages really were lockkeepers' cottages, so they were a very small artisan cottage.
Okay.
So and so it was hard enough to get the guest, me, the cameraman, the floor manager, into this tiny little bedroom. But we were all in there, and also Rolf Harris's wife was there, right there. And it was such a small room. She was right next to, standing right there. It's just off camera right there. And so I started interviewing Rolf. You're going to be at Glastonbury this year. How great. Blah, isn't it fabulous? And I could hear this noise. And the noise was the beads on my dress. And it was a long dress right to the ground. And he was scrunching my dress. And we were live on television on the Big Breakfast. So I didn't know what to do because, A, Rolf is a national treasure at this point. There's never been any shadow that I've ever heard about his reputation at all. B, his wife's right there. And as far as I'm concerned, I thought they were very happily married. I don't want to be the person that ruin someone's marriage, for God's sake.
Yeah.
C, it's a really, really lovely programme, very much watched by children and young people with a very upbeat, jolly atmosphere.
Yeah.
So I couldn't go, Rolf Harris, get your hand off my thigh or whatever it was. And his hand was encroaching. I really didn't know what to do. But I did know that there was no way that it was going to get past a certain part of my underwear at all. I wasn't prepared to have that because I was on television. Absolutely not. So just as it got to the kind of perimeter of my underwear, I just did the thing that you're never allowed to do as a presenter, which is say, and now it's time to go to a break. We're going to a break. All right, I'll see you after the break, and jump off the bed as fast as I could, which, of course, anyone who's ever presented a show knows. You wait for the floor manager to tell you. You can't just go to a break when you want to.
Yeah.
It's not up to you to do it, but I had no choice. I jumped off the bed. I stood there. There's his wife. There's him. He made completely normal conversation. And after the commercial break, we went back and did another bit.
Did you tell people at the time?
I told my then husband, I told, I think, my sister, a couple of girlfriends. I didn't go to my bosses and tell them, and I didn't make any complaint. After all, I was married. I was perfectly fine. It's not like I was a child or anything. But years later, and it was, so this happened in 1996. And in 2014, it's a long time later, I get this knock at the door, and it's the police. And they had the tape. And they said, we believe you were assaulted by Rolf Harris live on television. And I said, gosh, I've never complained. And they said, well, there's now a case. He's going to court, paedophilia. Would you testify in court? I said, I didn't really want to, but I said I would. But in the end, I didn't have to. And he was convicted. So that was, I suppose, has to be my worst interview of all time, doesn't it, really?
And I'm sure you would have written about that at the time in the column.
Not at the time, of course not.
After the
when the police came in. In the end, I gave an interview about it to the Express because the police asked me to, because they said if I did, they thought other people might come forward.
Yeah.
I didn't get paid for it, obviously. Why would I want to get paid for something like that? So I did give the interview. And then I was mercilessly trolled online. People saying, God, we thought Rolf Harris had bad judgment, but Vanessa Feltz, yuck, disgusting, blah, blah. Really, it was extraordinary. It was so bad that I was asked on the news, BBC News, to talk about it. The funny thing was, I had an £8 Nokia. I didn't even get a smartphone until the pandemic.
Okay.
So I hadn't seen any of it. I'd heard about it, but I hadn't seen it.
Yeah.
And then when it's not real to you, it's not real to you. If you don't see it, it's nothing. But the most extraordinary part of this story, which I have not mentioned since to anyone, it's the first time I've ever said this, is I was asked onto the BBC Lunchtime News to talk about, can you believe the level of trolling? Isn't this an extraordinary thing? He's a convicted paedophile. He's in prison. You're telling the story that the police asked you to tell for no money, and you are being mercilessly trolled about this. What do you think about it? But guess who the person interviewing me on the news was?
Hugh Edwards. Oh,
and he couldn't have been nicer. Such a nice man, I thought.
Yeah.
So empathetic and charming. Said he'd been sent up to Norwich to Anglia to be trained in the art of interviewing by watching me. His bosses had sent him. Couldn't have been nicer. Can you imagine how shocked I was when I heard about him?
Yeah. Jeez.
I know.
Okay, so Rolf was one of the three.
He was the worst. Alongside him, obviously much not comparable in nastiness, Miss Piggy. Who's the most unpleasant.
I was not expecting
what an
that,
unpleasant
Vanessa.
person she is. Unpleasant, very vicious, very, very hostile. And the funniest thing of all is that the puppeteers were lovely. So I'm having a great chat with them beforehand, and it was all the legendary ones, Frank Oz and all those people, the Muppet, the absolute legends. Couldn't have been nicer. They duck under the bed. Miss Piggy, what a beep. An absolute beep. And it was her, Gonzo and Kermit. I think it was going, or Fuzzy Bear. I don't, I'm not really much of a Muppet person, but and so she was on one side and they were the other side, and for no reason at all, I just happened to be facing sort of more to that side. Yeah. So I spoke to Kermit first, and she was offended. She took against me.
She probably thought you fancied Kermit. She's very protective.
She probably did.
Yeah.
I think she was just jealous, but she was really unpleasant.
Did you flirt with Kermit? Is
okay, just a little.
Yeah, well, that doesn't surprise me.
There's something about the green. There's something about an amphibian. I don't know what can I tell you. Don't tell anyone that. That's confidential. And Madonna was just very difficult. Kept everyone waiting. It was a massive press junket. She kept people waiting something like 7.5 hours. It was the Evita junket, yes. Oh. And I got thoroughly fed up. I thought, well, I'm a person with a life too.
Yeah.
And also didn't apologise or explain. And, wasn't cooperative, was difficult. And I just thought, oh, God. So I must say, didn't take to her. Mm-hmm. Also, she's so not a people pleaser.
Yeah.
Doesn't care if you like her or not. Couldn't care less. Which is unusual.
Yeah.
Because as I learned on The Big Breakfast, lots of huge Hollywood stars, Goldie Hawn, Jim Carrey, they do care. Mm-hmm. After the interview, they say, was that okay? Was that all right for you? And you think, gosh, you're a world famous megastar. You really care if it was, but they do seem to.
Yeah.
And some of them were very, very nice, like Danny DeVito bought everyone chocolates. Some people were just lovely people, and you could see they were. Some were very, very sexy because it was the bread. So you're asking me who was my favourite? I've suddenly remembered who I think my favourite probably was. Well, I've got two favourites.
Go on.
Okay, one was Wesley Snipes.
Oh.
He was just as sexy as hell. And said
Vanessa, did you have to pick a black guy? Did you have to pick a black guy?
I didn't have to, but he was gorgeous. And he said he wanted to produce and star in a cop drama which would involve running down between my breasts. And people would get caught in the cleavage and blah, blah. And I was just twinkling back at him. Did I think it was sexist or inappropriate? No, I thought it was absolutely marvellous. I just totally loved him. But my real, I suppose, all-time favourite really is Jeff Goldblum.
Oh, he's a real charmer.
Mate.
Yeah.
Oh, he is something else.
Yeah.
I mean, he is very handsome, obviously, very funny, obviously. He can play the piano like a dream.
Yeah.
He's an artist. He can paint, beautifully. I mean, he's really an accomplished, multi-talented, Renaissance man. I mean, he's just irresistibly fabulous in every way. So I suppose he's my favourite.
It's funny. I was hoping she was going to say,
You?
JJ,
You're all right.
it's been,
You're okay.
Never,
You'll do.
Never mind.
You'll do.
We can edit that out, actually. Just cut out that whole part out about the favourite
That's
guys.
the bit where I say JJ is my favourite.
You've always been honest about your love life and about your heartbreak. Do you think that brings you a stronger connection to your audience? You must get fan mail from
I'm not
people.
doing it for that reason.
I know
but,
you're not doing it for that reason, but
I
you must
suppose the fact that, lots of people have had failed relationships and divorces and broken hearts. Almost everyone has, I suppose. So, yeah, it's just true, unfortunately. I wish it were not. I wish I could be one of those. I'd love to have been one of those people that fell in love with my school sweetheart and is still happily married all these years later. That's all I ever really wanted. So I wish it were not true. But I suppose, yes, and a sort of side effect of failed relationships and heartbreak is that people will identify with it because they've had the similar feeling. But it's a shame, though. I wish I hadn't.
Oh, of course, V. You've been successful, from my perspective, in everything that you've done.
Really? Is that the way you see it?
That's the way I see it. Yeah.
Wow, okay.
Through your professional life, it
Nice of
seems
you
like
to say.
you've been successful as a journalist. When we used to work together on Talk TV, and we'd literally be on set together, and you'd say something, and I'd be thinking, I've no idea what that means, and I just go, "You're incredibly smart. You went to a great university. You've been raised well. You've now got a wonderful kids, grandkids.
Yeah,
even your
I've got 4
grandkids are
lovely
superb.
grandkids. Yeah, they're lovely. Thank you.
So, do you feel that as you've gotten older, the industry has treated you differently?
I'm not sure. I've just, last year I landed my own show on Channel 5. I'm 63. I know I don't look at an absolute walking miracle, but and I'm shocked that I am. When I say it, I don't really mean it. And I always expect someone to say, "No, you're not. Don't be ridiculous. What? Don't be silly. You're 27, aren't you?" I can't. When older people used to say to me, "Hey, time flies. It all goes so fast. Relish it, cherish it." You think, "Oh, shut up, you boring old person. Why don't you just shut up?" But it's true, obviously.
Yeah, it is.
And when they say you never, you never feel whatever it is, however old you are, you look in the mirror, you're shocked.
Yeah.
You're glad your eyesight isn't as good as it was because you'd be horrified if you could actually see yourself. But also you just think, I can't be that old. When the headline is Granny Mugged, can that be me? Oh my God, it can't be me. I used to be the youngest at everything. I really did. I was the youngest at everything. And suddenly I'm this old and no one's amazed. I'm amazed. Can't believe I'm this old. But I had a television show at Talk TV, and that was a brand new show that started in sort of the end of 2022 and was right through 2023, and that was great. Then I got this brand new show on Channel 5 last year, which has been commissioned for the whole of this year. Yeah. So I feel as, and then, when I got my first Vanessa show, it was 1994. I was 32. Now I'm 63. I've got my Vanessa show. It's still called Vanessa. Yeah. I'm still Vanessa, I think. I don't feel inside like I'm any different. So, has the industry treated me differently? Well, not really differently, but the good thing is I'm still there, to my amazement. I might have to start singing that show from Stephen Sondheim's Follies that Carol Burnett used to sing about, good times and bum times. I've seen them all. Yeah. And I'm here. I'm still here. I might have to start singing that. Maybe that better be my repertoire. Ooh, maybe I should start the show with that. You think so?
Yeah, let's cut and go to the top of the show.
Good times and bum times, I've seen them all, and my dear, I'm still here. But that kind of a thing.
Perfect.
Something like that.
Something like that would be wonderful.
Yeah. Maybe not. Okay. As I love you, I won't sing again, I promise.
What advice would you give to your younger self, Vanessa?
Read law so you can be a barrister and you don't have to put up with any of this nonsense. I think I would have sort of fought harder against the pressure to get married so young, and try to kind of establish a feeling of being sufficient on your own, which is obviously a very important thing to feel, which I've never really quite managed to feel. I'm being much too honest here. I could have given a frivolous answer, but I'm giving a real answer, which I usually do. I think I would have made myself do more things on my own for longer, so that I didn't feel bereft if I wasn't part of a couple, because I still haven't managed to get over that. And it's quite a crushing feeling. Much better to feel you're absolutely sufficient on your own, which I know I am. It's the feeling that's hard to get rid of.
Yeah.
That I think I would have done. Yeah, become a barrister and wait longer to get married.
Well, I'm glad you didn't become a barrister, because then I would never have met you. Unless you were representing me, probably that might have happened. Actually.
Oh, don't say that!
25 years from now, where's Vanessa Feltz?
How old will I be in 25 years if the Lord spares me? Ancient. I'm about to be 64.
44. in 25 years?
25 years, 64, 74, 84, plus 5, 89.
89 years old.
Still writing that Express column, I reckon.
Yeah.
Don't you think so?
I think so.
Still, just toddling onto the Vanessa show and still doing it. I had Miriam Stoppard, Dr. Miriam Stoppard, on my show last week. She's 89. And she's just written a book called Sex, Drugs and Walking Sticks. So out of respect for the fact that she was 89 on the show, I kept thinking we ought to discuss the walking sticks. She wouldn't have any of it. All she wanted to do was she kept saying, and what about the sex? What about the sex? She's 89. Please, God, may God smite me with that. Imagine I'm 89, still looking great, and on TV saying, what about the sex? What about the sex? I mean, I'd like to be there. So that's what I want to be when I grow up. Dr. Miriam Stoppard.
Dr. Miriam Stoppard.
Yeah.
Perfect. Is there anything you still want to do that you haven't done? I feel like you've done everything.
Well, I just remember when I asked Lionel Blair. Do you remember the late, wonderful Lionel Blair? Dancer and, impressionist. And, he used to be on that Give Us a Clue, didn't he? Or whatever
that's
it was.
right, yeah.
And he was a great, great fellow. He really was. And I once had him on my show and he was about 90 or something. And I said, is there anything you still want to do, Lionel? Thinking he might say have lunch or something. And he said, I'd still like to star in an A-list Hollywood movie. And he was 90-odd. I mean, his ambition, God bless him, had still not subsided.
Yeah.
I'm just waiting for a call from Brad Pitt, and I'll say yes.
Vanessa, 25 years with the Express. Thank you for your service.
Thank you.
And we'll be back here in 25 more years doing the same thing here. The viewers saying, "What? She's still here."
Please, God.
Yes.
And is he
She's
still here?
And I'm still here.
Oh, let's hope so. Let's hope so. Here's to the next 25.
Yeah, thank
Lots
you
of
very
love,
much,
JJ.
Vanessa.
Thank you very much.
Cheers. Well, that is it for this very special edition of the Daily Expresso with the legend Vanessa Feltz. Leave your comments below, like, subscribe, and share, and we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.